I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to tell you about our super exciting conference this October called The New No, taking place in Jersey City. And I'm going to start by just making a couple of remarks. First of all, there's nothing more fundamental to who we are as people, to our humanity, than this capacity that we have to know. And second, there's absolutely nothing disconnected about the act of knowing, right? When we talk about new technologies, which we do in all of our events, which we did in all day yesterday, right? When we talk about changing the behaviors, what people do, what we're talking about is changing what they know, right? How they know themselves in the world, how they know and understand their colleagues, how they understand themselves in the world. So this is a really kind of important point for me, right? That these notions of new technologies are absolutely connected to this phenomenon of knowing and how fundamental knowing is. So let's just look for a second at the glory of the verb, right? It's a big verb, right? Knowing isn't just about questions of certitude and what's fixed in our minds. Knowing is about our capacity to recognize, to become familiar with, to discern one thing from another, right? Knowing is, of course, an output of science, something that we're intimately familiar with, but it's also an output of our experience in everyday life, right? Knowing is directly connected to who we can know with, what kinds of things we can access to, and how we're capable at any given moment in time to engage that information. So how we do these things, how we engage with people with whom we know, how we engage with information, with content, with experiences, what we're allowed to engage with is absolutely an expression of the moment, of the times that we live in, right? There's nothing constant about those things. The way that you and I do these things are completely different from the way our parents and previous generations have. The position of the New No conference in October, the position of our conference is that these things are changing in very fundamental ways. Who we can know with, what we can know, how we can know are changing in deep and fundamental ways, and these changes have profound implications for your business. So just to highlight what we think some of these changes look like, what we think the arc of some of these changes are, I'm going to propose 3 provocations and then get to a sort of a discussion of the fabulous list of speakers we have waiting for you in October. The first is this question of who we can know and the sort of profound changes taking place around the kinds of people that we're allowed to engage with, that we're able to engage with. My own work is, as some of you know, about the kind of interpersonal work that people do via the kinds of digital platforms that are available to us today. So I'm deeply interested in the fact that all of these platforms have allowed us to start to engage with people we don't know, right? A platform like Airbnb, platforms like Zipcar, platforms like Dog Vacay, all these platforms that enable many, many more interactions between strangers. That's a new kind of phenomenon, right? The kinds of interactions that businesses have with crowdsourcing and Mechanical Turks, outsourcing of big problems, right? And big data mining infrastructures that are enabling businesses to really know their markets in fundamentally different ways. We have these really interesting questions before us of, given all of these new kinds of interactions with different kinds of people, who are the real experts? And how do you find them? And how do you know when you found one? Right? What we know is changing. Technically, we should be able to find these experts because our access to information has increased in all these dramatic kinds of ways, ostensibly democratizing knowledge, right? But on the other hand, we heard yesterday, and we continue to hear about the fact that new forms of privatization continue to appear, making access not always obvious, right? Changing our notions of public and private. So what kinds of accesses do we really have, and to what end? And then finally, how we know is changing. The lifespan of useful information is lauded to be just in time, something that lives for the moment. Well, what kinds of knowledge persist in value beyond the moment, right? And how do we discern between those kinds of things? These are the kinds of questions we're posing in the conference and that we expect to address. Let's take a couple of minutes to look at the fabulous list of speakers that we have. So beginning with this question of who are the real experts, we expect to emphasize notions of what do we mean by the right talent, right? What kind of people have access and who doesn't to knowledge? What are the models of work that are evolving to enable employees to interact in certain ways and to produce knowledge in the workplace? And what happens to these workforces in the future as more and more knowledge production is outsourced and handled in different kinds of ways? We will have Vivian Ming, Chief Scientist of Guild. Some of you may know of this startup that's a few years old. Guild produces talent acquisition technologies, helping employers to seek out the right kinds of talent in different sorts of ways, so circumventing traditional lenses of educational institutions and career experience. Vivian's going to talk about this interplay of neural prosthetics, AI systems, augmented cognition, and what that means for enabling new kinds of technical talent. Pooja Warrior, who is the co-founder and director of Unlimited India, which is a launch pad, a kind of incubation tank in India. We'll talk about a sort of society of global freelancers and future ways of working. Marianne Wolf of Tufts University, director of the Center for Reading and Language Research, will talk about the role of technology in literacy development for those without access to teachers in schools, so to more traditional, for those without access to more traditional sort of forms of education and access to education. 2, what is the point of knowing anything at all? Emphasis on why do we bother learning in the new now, right? With perspectives from the neurosciences, arts, economics, and the computing sciences. Nolan Bushnell, of course, founder of Atari, and presently the CEO of BrainRush, will be speaking on improving learning efficiency using neuroscience, cognitive science, psychology, and gaming. Mira Calix, some of you may know her. She's a musician, composer, producer, and performer based in the UK. Signed with Warp Records to talk about 2 sides of the creative process. David Rothschild, an economist with Microsoft Research, to talk about prediction markets, right, and what that means for making and understanding forecasts. And then third, what persists beyond just in time? How do we deal with this notion of value of knowledge beyond a particular moment? So here the emphasis is on current trends, what comes next in the field of learning, and whether or not universities will even exist in the new know. Anand Agarwal, president of edX, will talk about MOOCs, the future of learning, and what this means for universities. Will we even have them? Deborah Estrin, a colleague and close friend of Vanguard's, will be back to talk about building the future university. Right? So in her capacity as a founding faculty of Cornell Tech, she's going to be talking about what it means to be establishing a new Department of Computer Sciences and a new academic institution in this world. And then finally, Marco Tempest, a magician, to talk about replacing secrecy with collaboration and the use of magic for prototyping future technologies. So this is a short list. It's not a complete list. Some of our additional committed speakers include Brian Kernighan, co-founder, co-creator of Unix, author of the 2 Unix Bibles, who's presently faculty member of the Department of Computer Science at Princeton University, Matthew Lieberman of UCLA, and Andrew McAfee, an economist and author of The Race Against the Machine. See you in Jersey City for the new know.